Hey everyone, welcome to episode number 50 of the Lift Free and Diet Hard podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Coates, and it's actually episode number 200 of the overall stream of podcasting. You just happened to rebrand it 50 episodes ago. But I've got Austin Current here to celebrate 50 new episodes. So it's great to have you on, brother.
Hey man, thanks for having me on.
I got to introduce you a little bit. And I've kind of been working on getting a bunch of new guests, people who haven't been on this podcast or the previous incarnation, because sometimes it feels like I'm going through some of the same people, and they're awesome. But I managed to get you. I've got Danny Lennon coming up, as long as everything works out well. And I was digging into, this happened because the Science of Strength Training, this little yellow fucking awesome book, popped up on my radar a while back. So I started digging into it, and you and I connected over the internet. It's a really cool book. So that spurred this. And I know you were on my friend Chris Little's podcast recently, The Lifestyle Chase. And I guess you've been on it a bunch of times. So it's like, all right, that's a reminder. I've actually got to move this up and get you on here. Now, I was digging into your history a little bit. Some of the stuff I didn't know about you. Well, you're the co-founder and co-owner of Physique Development. That's your online coaching business. And I did not know that you were the second youngest person to win an IFBB Pro card.
Yeah, in the physique division. Yeah, specifically physique. Yeah, no, it all happened really quick. I just turned 20 at the time. And the only other person I think was Jeff Seed, who got it sooner, which is so funny.
You guys went in opposite directions in terms of like quality and evidence-based training information.
Oh yeah, man. And again, like, I think it's more of an attest to like how I found myself competing, and its influence it's played in my career. And I don't really compete any longer. The last show I did my last pro show I did was in 2016. So I've gotten married since then. I've lived in a couple of different countries since then. It just a little bit more professionally focused and less competing focused currently. But yeah, it all happened really quick. It kind of started and then it progressed, and then I was like, oh, okay, here we are. So that's about how it went.
And you tacked on a Bachelor of Exercise Science on top of all that. So I guess, and that's led into a lot of educational stuff through the industry, which leads me to one of the basic questions I had was the interest and passion in, fitness competitions only to spawn a greater interest in the educational side of stuff that went off in that direction? Or was the interest always in the educational coaching side, and it just happened to also be that you were a competitor who did it concurrently and then kind of said, okay, I've done this, now I want to focus on the coaching?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I started competing. So I started competing my second year of university. And so I had gotten into university, kind of went through my first year. I was in exercise science already. And I think when I started competing, I was talked into competing really. And it wasn't really something that I wanted to do at the time. And I wasn't really interested in. I'd never heard of it before. And the people at my gym had competed before. And a close friend, Alicia, she had competed in figure for a couple of years leading up to that point. And so this was back in 2013. So she was like, hey, this new men's physique division just came out. Maybe you should try it out. I think you'll enjoy it. I think you have a good physique for it. I think you should try it. And I was like, okay, no, but thanks for thinking of me. And, she kept on it, and I kept looking into it more. And I was inspired by, the Steve Cooks of the world at that point. And so I started competing. I did well in my first couple shows, things like that, which kind of got me more interested into it. Obviously, if you're good at something. And I kind of lost that competitiveness through athletics, through injuries, and just deciding not to pursue anything else moving forward. And so I was kind of yearning for something competitive. And so this kept me going. This kind of was this competitive thing that I didn't quite understand. And, I do like physical challenge. And so it was like, all right, sign me up. I gave myself 6 weeks to prep. I ended up winning, I think, 3 of the divisions in that show. And I was like, oh, all right, I guess I'll do this, I'll see this through. And so I did it for the next, few years, and that allowed me to finish out my degree. And I think the relationship between the two of them was I started to compete, which then really allowed me to see in real time things that I was learning in the classroom and gave me a little bit more hands-on application. Because also during that time, I started to train clients in person. And then, after a year and a half of that, and after I earned my pro card, I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll start to take clients online, because I was starting to get requests for it. And so that's kind of the inception of physique development at that time, back in 2014. And so I think they played hand in hand with each other really well. And the competing got me just more interested in my degree, and then vice versa. So I was really putting a lot of things into practice that I was using through my competing, through things like that, through coaching other people. But yeah, I don't think I would have been, I don't know if I'd have been as good at either, or either of them would have went as well as they did without each other. Like, I think they had some sort of like intimate balance between the two of them, and they shared sort of a delicate relationship, in the early stages of my career.
You don't lean all that heavily on the physique competitive past, at least not with your public image as an educator.
Yeah, I decided. So it was back in 2017. I made a post back in that time when I was really fighting with, I grew my social media originally and like got a lot of my business through the way I looked. And it was becoming increasingly more important to me that I was more valued for my intellect and my ability to explain things really well, and to be a good coach, and more or less from my mind, more so than just my physique. And I didn't want that. I'm someone who always wants to stay in shape and look good and, be strong and whatever else, just for my own personal things, and knowing the benefits of it. Right. We talked, off air a lot about that. But yeah, I made a post back in that time in 2017, kind of like essentially why you won't be seeing my physique moving forward. And I've really stuck with that over the last, since then. And I don't post my physique. I don't, what you see of my physique is through my training videos, right? If you're interested, like, all right, see it through that, but I've kind of moved away from that. And the sole purpose was I didn't want that pressure of the way I looked to dictate my career, and to dictate if I was quote unquote relevant, or whatever we use these days in terminology on social media. And I saw it more or less becoming a negative trait of fitness in my life rather than a positive one. So I kind of made that executive decision then to kind of like pull the plug on my physique and just go with trying to prove myself more with my mind, more so than anything else.
And a bunch of stuff that this leads to. One of them, I had this conversation with one of the coaches I mentor. His name's Levi Tate. He's a young men's physique guy, really passionate, evidence-based young man. And my buddy Mike Gettier has also said the same thing. You built a following based on your physique, as you said. When you came to try to turn around and share evidence-based informational content, did you find that at first the visual imagery was more popular, got more likes, got more interaction, because that's the following base that you built? And how was the experience of shifting over, and the emotional fight to potentially go back to some of the stuff that had been more popular? My media, so I'll preface this and I'll let you just dive into it. I mean, I've never competed, no competitive history. I'm a big guy. And my old profile photo and a lot of the stuff is like striated delt, big delts, a big dude in like a tank top. And then I had some photos done where it's like much more mainstream accessible, I suppose. So I stepped away from that image. So, and I did that kind of deliberately to be a bit more accessible broadly as my career has gone on as a coach. So back to you, how did you manage, and how would you tell a coach to manage the allure of feeding the old following and the way that people interacted with you, and maybe even something about the process of transitioning over and what that does to the old following versus attracting new following.
Yeah. And so, I did it at a time too, where I had already started to kind of transition away from it. And I was starting to gain a lot of traction and more or less build my social media to more or less what it is today. Or really, it used to be a lot more involved. I used to get a lot more engagement. I used to, the era of 2017, 2018, Instagram was more skewed toward my being in favor of my style and being found and growing and stuff like that. It's, it's becoming increasingly harder and harder to navigate the space. And I know you talk a lot about navigating the space now. But in your question, or to answer your question, I had already kind of started to do it, and I was leaning more with, video-based, execution-based, technique-based content. And I was approaching it where, I'd seen a lot of people do technique-based content more from like a strength or powerlifting background place. And I come from more of the personal training, body composition, bodybuilding, physique world. And so I was like, well, let me just take kind of what they're doing and I'll mold it to what I know, which is like your everyday movements in the gym. Like, and every day that I'd go to the gym was content for me. Because I went, at this time I was living in Australia, and I went to an Anytime Fitness over there. And every time I walked in, it was just like a gold mine of information, or gold mine of content coming to my mind. Cause I was like, as soon as I walk in, I'm not like a outwardly judgmental person, but like, you can't help but look at someone and be like, well, they're doing that wrong. They're doing that wrong. And so I would just take note and make, notes on my phone of like, all right, lat pull down. These are the mistakes I'm seeing. Here's what I can tell people, here's what I could post about. And I did that for essentially every movement, every machine that I could possibly do it for. And I started to kind of build things from there, and people enjoyed it. It was had a level of entertainment to it. But I think where things really kind of like set in a little bit more was the fact that the caption sort of backed it up. It wasn't just the visual meme. It was, oh, if you actually read this dude actually knows, he makes great points. He knows what he's talking about, insofar that my workouts are getting better. I'm noticing less injuries. I'm feeling more tension on the desired muscle groups that I'm trying to train. And, which obviously creates more of like a channel of engagement and a channel of people sharing your content more and telling their friends about it and whatever else. And so that kind of allowed me to, noticing that was kind of allowing me to move the needle in the direction I wanted to move it in. It allowed me sort of there may be a better word for this, kind of the professional courage to transition out of being more aesthetically physique driven, and moving away from bodybuilding and physique based stuff. And like yourself, like really how my book is written is more towards the general population, trying to create less friction to the level of entry to fitness and to strength training. And, if I can break down some barriers and make things a little bit more approachable and understandable, I want to do that. And it's really hard, and another thing that I really try and do through my technique-based videos and especially YouTube-driven content, and I've gotten a lot of positive feedback from the comment section as far as this goes, but it's sort of, people are kind of relieved that someone who has information that is valuable to them, one, doesn't yell at them, and two, keeps their shirt on. And so I wanted to be more of that approachable, encouraging, non-condescending voice that is more of a positive light to good information, more so than just someone who's screaming with their shirt off and being condescending and making fun of you because you don't know and scaring you out of asking good questions and things like that. So
big pet peeve of mine, that kind of behavior. I'm just being an
Yeah.
arrogant ass to followers. If someone's not agreeing with what you're saying or posing questions, they're being, just nasty. And I know that there are people in the industry who branded themselves that way, right? Some really
Yeah.
evidence-based people, but I don't think it's a good road for an emerging coach to follow. Even if somebody had some success with it, they may not have had success because of it. And I won't say any names. I can think of several people. If anything, they may have hurt their overall trajectory, and they may be successful in spite of that kind of behavior. So I always
Okay.
like the high road, try to be, you get some really nasty, disingenuous stuff occasionally in comments. If that's someone's game, they're blocked. I mean, I don't even entertain that nonsense. Otherwise, if it's something that's, contrarian, but not ill-intended, then okay, cool. You can engage with them, treat them with respect. How all your other followers, especially the people who never engage, never comment, they'll notice this stuff, and how they see you treat other people goes a long way to their opinion of you, not the person you're sparring with.
Right. No, I agree. I love how you said that. And again, I'm all for the contrarian who shows up in the comment section. I'm all for productive discourse. I'm all for it. And the more we can have that, the better it can and the easier it gets, right? Like, as you know, I know you're a writer for multiple websites and publications, and as you write and as you learn, right, you've published information that you probably look back on and you're like, oh, I probably would change the way I say that. Or someone read one of my articles and they're like, hey, in an article a couple of years back you said this, but you're not teaching that information anymore, or this is different in your video, why is that? Or I read this online from this person and I love them, they're my guru, and why, you're telling me not to do that. And then, are you attacking them, or are you attacking me? And it's funny because, and the answers to those questions are obviously no. And I have concrete examples of how you can change the tone of discourse almost instantly on social media through comments. Like, my content back in 2017, like, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, garnered a lot more attention, and it was really created to garner more attention and grow my social media channel. As now I'm not as focused on that as much as just sort of nurturing what I kind of have as a community and just saying, like, what do you guys actually need, rather than like trying to always find new people to follow me, right? Because like I'm not in a position where I technically like need that or desire that as much as I'd much rather just answer the questions that are kind of burning within the people who already follow me. And then if there's new people, fantastic. But back in 2017, like, let's say there was, 300, 400 comments on an execution post of mine telling people how to do a dumbbell row or a bench press. I mean, I'd get literal, like, go die, dude. Like, I'd get private DMs, like, telling me to, like, I should get all certifications revoked, wishing ill harm on my family. Like, it was a nasty environment. And all because I was saying, like, hey, maybe you should stop doing this a little bit, or maybe you should stop doing this and do a little bit more of this when doing a, let's say, dumbbell row, to keep with our example. And, I have concrete examples. I've screenshotted them. I've made them a part of multiple presentations I've done over the years, speaking on how to be a good communicator and a good educator, or just a valuable resource for people. And, I could de-escalate a comment section or a comment thread very easily from the standpoint of the initial attack, and just asking a simple question and like being actually being interested in that person. Where I read their comment, I took into consideration, like, okay, I can kind of see what you mean here. I kind of see where you would have learned this in the past. And all right, well, let's take it a step back here, and let me ask you this, have you thought about it in this way? And usually if you respond in a positive and sort of a kind manner that seems genuine and helpful towards that person, almost 9 times out of 10, the response from them back was, oh man, I can't, I didn't even think you'd respond. Like, thank you so much. Their entire tone changed instantly. And it was like, that was 9 times out of 10. And so, I think it's more or less, again, how you respond to things. And one thing that it's stuck with me for a long time. I think I originally read this and like heard this in like 2013, 2014. It's just stuck with me. But, to paraphrase the quote, it's like, never allow someone else to dictate your actions, or never allow someone else's nasty behavior to dictate your own. And so like, if they're being a shithead or if they're being an asshole, that doesn't mean you should be an asshole. Like, that's on them. Let them be, like, let them show up how they want to show up. And you have every option to do the opposite. Like, you have every option. No one's forcing you into, all right, you've been nasty, now I'm going to be nasty, and there's not one part of, especially public discourse, that needs to go that way, especially when we're talking about fitness, dude. Like, there's no, how's the saying go? There's no life or death situations within strength training. Like, in terms of like, should I do a dumbbell curl like this or like this? It's like, dude, we can have a conversation, but it's not life or death, man. You're not a worse off person because you were doing a bicep curl this way for so long. And now I'm telling you, maybe that's wrong. I'm not attacking you. I'm just informing you from my experience and my education. That's it.
I tend to almost avoid language like right and wrong. And especially with my individual clients, I'll show them something, or if they're like, oh, they want to check up on some sort of form thing. Oh, I was totally doing it wrong. I'm like, no. And I always say, no, you weren't doing it wrong. It's just that we tweaked it to make it a little bit better for you. A little less likelihood you're going to get hurt, or, you'll get a slightly better reward profile for what we're doing. And it's almost a pet peeve of mine seeing posts. I mean, there's the green check mark and red X through stuff. And often enough, they'll be kind of exaggerated, where it's like, okay, cool. Like, this one way is bullshit and the other way is right.
Yeah.
But we're starting to see stuff that I look at, like, the X is right. It's fundamentally right. And it's someone who's branding around a certain way of approaching things. And it's just like, both of these are perfectly fine. And I'm looking at this crap going, we're calling things that are absolutely okay wrong. And that's where I kind of say, all right, this is bullshit. Like, this is not helping. This is confusing people. So, I tread very lightly when I approach this sort of thing.
No, I think that's smart. I think language is very, very important. And it's something that I've tried. And again, like, in me speaking, if I pause for any amount of time, it's because I'm probably searching for a better word to say over the one I was going to naturally say, right? I'm still really working on, even in conversations like this, to choose the right word for the job. And there's a reason I moved away from content like that. And now, instead of like a red X, I use like a caution sign. And I usually talk about, if you go to some of my recent content or recent reels, if you're on my profile at all, there's going to be a caution sign. And then there's going to be like a green check of like, we're removing the vulnerabilities of this exercise in the green check version. But in the first one, instead of the red X, there's a caution sign, because it's not technically wrong, as you're saying. Going too far down in an RDL isn't technically wrong. It's just vulnerable. You're creating opportunity for higher risk of injury. You're creating more vulnerabilities. And if you want to play that game, go for it, dude. Have at it. But you don't have to. And there's a lot of stimulus to gain from staying within a more appropriate range of motion. And that's all we're trying to point out, right? And I'm really trying to, and I know you have this goal too, I'm trying to keep people in the game. And one of my biggest, I posted a video on YouTube in 2015. It may have been 2014, 2015, I think 2015. That was titled "Live to Train Another Day." And in that video, I was like, I injured myself deadlifting. And it's a funny thing to go back on, because it's like, one of my original vlogs, which is treacherous to go back and watch. But I laugh at myself going back and watching them. But the message is like still rings true of live to train another day, and don't risk something that doesn't need to be risked, especially if you're a general population. Like if you're a non-athlete or like a non-competitive athlete, I'll say. And honestly, a lot of times, even if you are a competitive athlete, the only way you get better is if you stay in the game, is if you live to train another day, if you're able to stay consistent to that routine, right? And to that programming or to that periodization. And so, yeah, I think my main goal with my content nowadays is just obviously to educate the best I can, but also just to kind of keep people in the game a little bit longer, because that's when we know most of these benefits from strength training come along. So,
and it's funny because agreed with everything you said there, and I can still find myself guilty of doing the shit that I post on social media about not doing, right? Like, I'll give a great example. So me and a buddy of mine, there's a pendulum squat here in Edmonton. We're all excited now because you can't find those damn things. I've heard that like they're barely any in Canada. I don't know if that's true or not. And I see Mike Isertel messing with them all the time. And these short, thick, stocky guys can move a lot of weight, like my friend Alex, who's like way shorter than me, just this dense barrel with thick legs. And there's another guy that we know, local. He's a classic bodybuilder, a guy named Justin Huey. Dude has got a great physique. And so Justin shows this video of him doing 7 plates for a handful of reps on this pendulum squat. Now, if you've ever used a pendulum squat, 7 plates is a mega fuck ton.
Yeah.
So I've been doing like tough sets of 4 plates for reps. And this is mean shit. So me and Alex started goofing around with it a little bit. We're both there. And, I slapped 5 on, and I get 2 reps with 5 plates. I'm like, this is tough. And I end up tweaking my right knee a little bit. It's fine. I just needed to give it a week of light duty, right? But still, it's like, hey, you're kind of going off plan. Definitely a bit of like fucking around ego lifting. That being said, we're also trying to push the boundaries of what we can do. Didn't go according to plan. Alex does okay with the 5, and then he gets 1 rep at the 6. And we're just thinking, how in the hell did this guy do this with 7? So, but again, it's totally being taken off course and guilty of doing the stuff that we're telling people. I'm certainly telling people not to do as well. But those little reminders also serve just, hey, don't do that again. You got lucky. You didn't hurt yourself seriously. Stay on course. And I also don't mind challenging myself to new push boundaries every once in a while. But this one was a little bit off plan, which is why I'm kind of going, nah, I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah. And again, like it's not that you shouldn't have fun and you shouldn't challenge yourself. And I think you should. Right. And there's times where it's like, I leave the gym and I kind of let myself take a set off or 2 or 3 or 4. And I'm like, you know what? I made it to the gym today. I'm going to let that one just be what it is. And then there's days where I'm virtually crawling out of the gym and I'm like, all right, that made up for the other session where I left 4 or 5 sets on the table. And I think there's again, it's sort of this auto regulation of not only lifting, but life in general. Right. And I think I often I look at, I think I've talked to many people like yourself about like sort of thinking of all things within the scope of periodization. Like, you need phases and blocks where you're driving intensity and volume and density of work. And then you need phases where you take off, you need deloads, you need phases where you're just focusing on one thing over another, right? And that goes with anything within life or within your professional career, within your lifting career. But again, I think there needs to be that fun and that challenge within the means that you have available. And, if that's all right, let's go off plan and let's try to load up this pendulum. Then, dude, have fun. Just try not to get hurt. And if you're going to get hurt and you can feel it coming, know when to stop. Right. And that's the hardest thing to do, especially when you're with someone else or a couple other buddies who are super strong. And that's the hardest thing to do, is kind of not allow that ego to become too inflated and kind of enter this sort of, well, it won't happen to me sort of behavior, because it will. It absolutely will. very easily.
You can get away with this shit when you're in your 20s and early 30s, probably.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
I'm 43.
Yeah, I'm
So
not there yet. So
no. So I keep getting reminded, especially in my early 40s, that I don't have as much wiggle room on some of this stuff as I did when I was younger. Now I still feel pretty good most of the time, and I think that's a product of being so consistent with the gym. But there's some nagging stuff that doesn't go away as quickly, or it never really kind of goes away anymore. So I have to modify my training. I've made modifications over the years. There's things that my left shoulder does not like: a wide position dumbbell shoulder press. Doesn't like it. Narrow's fine, no problem. Doesn't like pull-ups anymore. Chin-ups are fine. Just there's something about being out in that fully abducted position is just not happy in there. And there's some tightness and whatever. And I've had some physio done on it. It's helped improve it. It's never 100%. My right knee gets a little pissy with some stuff, so I have to be a little careful with it. But if I'm being smart and staying true to what I'm supposed to do, I'm fine.
yeah. I mean, again, live to train another day. Know your limits and challenge them when you can, and challenge them when you feel motivated to. But also understand it's helpful to live within your means, right? Lift within your means. It's the same thing. Stay within budget, right? And you're going to be able to stay alive a bit longer and thrive within that atmosphere a little bit longer. And again, as it always returns back to that conversation of you got to reap the rewards and to reap the benefits of investing into your health. You got to show up weekly. You got to show up most days of the week in some way, shape, or form. Doesn't mean you have to show up most days of the week to train. It's good to probably have a couple days a week that you train and really challenge yourself. But to keep showing up, right? Not being able to walk and stay active just because you were stupid in the gym, that's silly. And that's going to take a toll on your health, right? And I was talking to, I think it was on the podcast with Chris, was like, we sort of have this sense of entitlement with our health. That's like, oh, well, I should just be healthy, because, and it's like, no, this is a daily fight, man. You got to think about it daily. You got to eat well. You got to train hard. You have to move around. You have to go to bed on time. Try not to drink too much of a very addictive drug, right? Like, you got to do things that are levels, at different levels of uncomfortable, but you have to continue to show up and invest into that daily effort of staying healthy and staying in the game. And that's how we remain healthy, right? Because we're not guaranteed our health, and we're not guaranteed or entitled to our health, in my opinion.
We've got a world now that's being engineered. Obviously, it wasn't engineered to make us unhealthy. It was engineered to make life convenient and easier for us. And it's had the unintended consequence of making us unhealthier. Have you read, I think it's Daniel Lieberman's book, Exercised?
I did. Yeah, I have. Yeah. I love that book.
Amazing book. And it's a really cool exploration of, our historical background, the lifestyle, some of the misconceptions about, he studied primitive tribes in Eastern Africa and other parts of the world, just to kind of get a sense of what their lifestyles are like, which would be the best proxy we have to, our ancestors. And while they're certainly very active, they're not like going all day long every day. There's a lot of leisure and downtime, but by and large, they're healthy, and they stay healthier longer in life. And the grandparents have different roles that, you wouldn't expect. And a lot of this stuff plays into a lot of the way that the energy demands from the things that we need to survive, we're kind of in balance. We've shifted that balance out of convenience to the point where we now have to actively choose to do those uncomfortable things in order to maintain our health. People throw around this all the time, obesity epidemic. Well, guess what? Obesity rates are rising, especially in the developed world. They're starting to rise more rapidly now in the developing world, as they kind of catch up to the way that the US and Western Europe and Japan and other places are. Although Japan, not really so high on the obesity scale. But side point, we absolutely actively need now to build in and choose exercise as a voluntary behavior. Part of that book is about how, like, primitive tribes, they would kind of look at you and like, you would voluntarily go and like go to the gym and exercise because they didn't need to. It was already built into the stuff that they needed to do to hunt, gather, and survive.
Yeah. And then again, like they didn't have the issue of too much, right? They didn't have an issue of excess, by and large. So that's another thing that you have to keep in mind too, right? Like, okay, we have an issue with excess. We have a luxury of convenience. We have a luxury of calories that I don't have to move ever really beyond 100 steps a day, maybe, or even less. And I can consume 10,000 calories a day if I really wanted to, right? Because you can order your groceries. They're all in your pantry. You can eat, a bag of almonds. You could eat a bag of M&Ms. You could eat whatever you want to do. Throw in some milkshakes. Before you know it, you're 4,000 calories in, and you've yet to even finish episode 3 of American Horror Story. So, it's like, man, that's an actual problem, right? And again, like I'm not the one to answer that problem or to answer that question, but what I can do and what we can do is create content that does motivate people to, again, break down the barriers of that entry level, or break down the barriers of entry to the fitness space, to strength training, or to exercise as a whole. And I'm not necessarily, I'm biased for strength training because I do love strength training and it's played such a role in my life, a positive role in my life. But do your fitness, man. Whatever makes you happy, do it. Whatever makes you active and challenges yourself and programs in a level of discipline and restraint within your life, do it. I'm all for it.
For the audio listeners, I'm holding up Austin's book, Science of Strength Training, just trying to cue him here. So talk about creating content. I mean, you've literally written a book, illustrated, really cool design. It's definitely part textbook and part, coffee table reading for the enthusiast. It kind of blends both worlds really well. How did that come to be, especially given the fact that you were the, men's physique guy turned educator? Because this is a serious piece of career capital. It's a concept I like. The fact that you've written a book, you've got the IFBB Pro card, that's a piece of career capital. It gives you a lot of credibility. So why the book?
Yeah. So I was approached for the book, really. And it was very interesting how it came about. And again, it's sort of opportunity, because I've tried to also ask myself that question. Why the book? How did it come about? Why were you asked to do these things? And what things can you repeatedly do and continue to show up to do to continue to get opportunities like this, right? Because when I had multiple phone interviews with the publisher to sort of nail down the fact that I'd be the author of this book. So they had the concept in mind for the book, and they basically brought the concept. They searched, more or less had the concept in mind, and they searched for an author sort of randomly. And so I was like, okay, I got to ask. I asked this on the phone to the publisher pretty much during my interview. Why me, dude? How did you find me? With all due respect, why me? I'm especially, I don't think, I think the book turned out really great. I do think ultimately I'm qualified to write the book, and I thought it turned out great. But all that aside, to the same tone, I don't think I should, I'm asking the same question. Why am I the one to write this book? Why was I the one to do this project? Why was I the person to fill this sort of gap within the space of strength training education? And I still can't really answer the question, but they saw something in the way that I communicated, and they liked the balance between writing that's just enough within the academic sphere, things that are referenced and from the scientific literature, but things that are written in a conversational, approachable way that are easy to understand. Where, if you read through this book, like there's no point in the book where I'm trying to like flex on any bit of intelligence. Like I've just, it's just straight material. It's just straight content. It's not, if we chose between the only quote unquote like big words in it are the big words that we had to like define, because it's technically the only word to describe what we were trying to do, right? Like mentioning like mechanotransduction, like we had to do that because it's like, okay, well, this is a proxy, so that leads down the line to other things, right? This is a sort of a metric of tension, muscular tension. So or what leads us down the line from muscular tension, right? And so in chapter 1 in physiology, it was like, how can we take these complex topics and make them easy to understand? And it was really challenging to do. But I also had a level of experience doing that through years and years of social media content and years of writing articles and stuff like that. And so they were randomly searching for people, and I guess they had sort of a short list of people, and through a couple different articles and features and things like that on different websites, they landed on me, and they reached out, and I thought it was a joke for the longest time. I asked my wife, I was like, do you think this is like a joke or for real? Or because I was on a plane going, so this was back in December of 2019 when I first got this email, to kind of like date sort of like the history of the book and how long it's taken from inception from idea to concept to published book. So it all started kind of that communication in December of 2019. And I was on a plane flying back home to see my family. And I was checking my email just to be sure there wasn't something I missed, because I was going to kind of shut off for the next couple of weeks. And I refreshed my email, and it basically just said book proposal, science of strength training. And I was like, this has got to be a joke, because like I receive a lot of sort of unsolicited influencer like type stuff, right, through email. And it's like, hey, what a great opportunity we have for you. And it's like, delete. I don't read most of it. And I'm thinking whoever I need to thank for the fact that they put a subject line that caught my attention enough so I didn't delete it. I can't imagine, in terms of like career capital, if I would have passed up an opportunity like this, I think I would have truly kicked myself for the rest of my life.
Something embedded there too that's worth pointing out. I don't know if you've read any of Cal Newport's stuff. Like
I have, yeah.
World Without Email, and it might be The World Without Email, might be Deep Work. Sorry, I think I said Book Yourself Solid. That's Michael Port. Deep Work. So he mentions how you're not under any obligation to respond to anything that doesn't really grab your attention. Now, I think if you get an authentic inquiry on social media, I always try to send a very authentic response back. But DMs are full of bullshit, like absolute bots, whatever. I don't even worry about that stuff. And yeah, emails, and the closest thing I have to that is not on the same scale, but you get this email, it's like, what is this crap? Some influencer shit. Oh, you want to be an affiliate marketer for like some shit no, fuck off. But then I get an email from Generation Iron, one of the publications I write for that you mentioned, and it's one of their like directors, and this is serious shit. I'm like, okay, well, let's talk to these guys. These guys make these bodybuilding movies. And so that ultimately did turn into an ongoing writing relationship with them. So it's not a book, but it's the same sort of thing. But for the coaches, you guys are going to get some fluffy nonsense. Ignore it. It's nonsense. But if you keep head down and creating and putting stuff out there, getting yourself out into I think in terms of like social media and brand, and I think in terms of career capital, like tangible pieces that, add credibility. And if you accumulate these things, sooner or later, some interesting shit's going to come your way.
Yeah. And it's opportunity through serendipity. Like it's an opportunity through putting yourself out there, and this came about, and I was sort of seeked out in that way because I'd put myself out there year after year after year with every piece of content I've ever created, right? Every piece of content that I hit publish on and edited and took take number 6, just to make it, or that could have been better, right? You never know who's watching. You never know who's going to read your article. You never know who is going to watch your video. And again, I never imagined that this opportunity would have, almost knocked on my front door and said, hey man, we know you're somewhat interested in fitness. Would you like to write what could be a cornerstone book of the strength training space? And it's like, let me think about it. Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks so much, and it's wild. And it never in my wildest dreams did I think that this would really come about. But, it was a challenge it was the challenge I didn't know I needed at the time. And, I felt I was like kind of treading water. And it's sort of that moment where you're like, I feel like I've been doing nothing but creating for so long. And it's sort of that level of like creation vulnerability where it's just like create for the sake of creating without any expectation of return. You don't deserve anything. You're not entitled to anything. You just need to create. And something, if you're worth investing in, and if you have something to say that's original, but also helpful in relation to content also being discussed, you'll get an opportunity for your voice to be heard a little bit louder.
Did you read Seth Godin's The Practice?
Not yet.
Okay, because you pretty much paraphrased one of the most critical points. It's create without any expectation of anything, in return. It's just that adding up over time. He's talking about the process of creating. So a lot of what you just said, you're gonna read that book and be like, this aligns with my philosophies. Really easy. Yeah. So I actually think anybody who's trying to get themselves out there needs to read this book.
I like Seth Godin a lot.
Oh, fuck, he's fantastic. He's essential reading on my list. And unlike most of the other authors, you can actually follow his social media. There's a lot of authors.
Yeah.
Like, you learn this lesson, stay the fuck out of their social media. I recently unfollowed Nassim Taleb, whose writing I love, because the guy is a pompous ass. He's an obnoxious jackass. He's awful to the way he responds to people. And he's got some weirdly anti-scientific beliefs, but his books, Anti-Fragile, is brilliant. Everybody should read it. His other stuff's phenomenal, Black Swan. But you get to this point, and I feel the same way about a lot of like celebrities, musicians. I mean, you're listening to Rage Against the Machine and you're surprised they have political views. There's something like, what's the joke? Is like, what machine did you think they were raging against? The toaster, a microwave, right? The fax machine. But by and large, especially when it comes to, books and whatever, I tend, ever read anything by like the Dilbert author, Scott Adams? People have different, like just Dilbert, right? People have different belief systems, but the guy's hardcore Republican Trump supporter. Now that's very offensive to some people and aligns with other. I'm not even getting into that stuff, but maybe just go enjoy Dilbert comics without diving into the political stuff. Now, a quick pivot with the last thing I was curious about. I also noticed with your media, we alluded to this a little bit earlier. You certainly got the bigger following. You're over 100,000 followers. And now I understand kind of where that came from. And you have your company, Physique Development. And I'm always fascinated with people. I'll give some examples who they balance both a personal brand identity, but also have a business entity. And they're not, for some people, I'll use Lane Norton, for example, Lane, BioLane. It is very much one entity. Absolutely. But then you've got Mike Isertel and Renaissance Periodization. He's one of my favorites, where RP is this massive entity, but Mike is also, something really massive. Sam Spinelli has E3 Rehab and Citizen Athletic. And I just had Quinn Hennick on here. He's great. And he's got the Clinical Athlete. So there's tons of examples of people who have, they're usually founders or co-founders more often of some company, but then they also have a very high profile, brand of their own. Is there anything to that balance for you? Do you find it's kind of natural that, the business goes one way and it draws in a certain type of person, whereas you wrote this book not as that owner of that business, you wrote that book as Austin Current?
Right. That's a good question. And I have to definitely give credit where credit's due. And I think the better and more you surround yourself with really good people who complement you, that allows things to nurture and grow in different directions, right? And I have ideas that I really pursue and I really take, and just run with, which is, the reason my social media gained the traction it did when it did. And I sort of hung on by a single thread ever since. And I just kind of make what I can out of it now. And it has helped in a lot of ways, right? And it's given me a platform, it's given me a voice, it's given me opportunities that probably otherwise wouldn't have come up as organically. But as far as the personal brand and the business entity, it kind of all started with the business as the main goal. And the thing about business is it sort of just starts to take shape. It sort of starts to tell its own story, and you start to attract a certain, let's say, customer or consumer of your content. And the more physique development grew and the more we added on to it, so there's 3 owners now, and there is about, I think here in the next month or so, there'll be 8 total coaches. So there's 11 people, not counting assistants and other people within the company. And again, like, it just keeps growing and organically taking the route that it sort of wants to take, right? It's sort of like water. It's going to find the path of least resistance and carve its own path. And I think that's, you have to allow your business to sort of do that, right? And you hope, that it takes shape that you enjoy and you can pour into and continue to be a part of and play an integral role within. But also with the personal brand, it allowed, I think those 2 things aligned well enough to where the personal brand fed into the business. And there are things that I do more and more that don't necessarily align perfectly with physique development, but I still want to do them or pursue them, right? And so, like the book, for example, the book wasn't physique development. That was kind of Austin Current, right? And I think as a coach, as someone who, and again, like, my wife has been lobbying for me to, again, it goes back to who you're surrounded by, and people who want to see you succeed and who see the value and sort of land grabs, right? And so we live in a culture and we live in a world where personal brand is very important, right? So whatever happens within, right, you could own a crazy successful company while simultaneously having a very successful personal brand, right? We see it all the time. You just mentioned Israel, right?
I think on a grander scale, Elon Musk is a very super.
Look at that. Yeah, look at him.
Yeah, right. Whereas some of these other major tech companies, well, Steve Jobs certainly was a larger than life figure, perhaps, posthumously. I know he was certainly a big deal when he was alive, but there are several other major tech companies where we know very little about, what is it? Page and Brin, the Google founders.
Yeah, I don't know anything about it. Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. Right. So, but I hijacked your example.
Oh, no, you're fine. So, I mean, you can have one without the other, or you could have both, right? And there hasn't really been a time where I've had to necessarily choose one or the other, which I think has been very helpful. And it's sort of allowed it to stay natural and organic. And there are things where, again, there's channels or there's topics that feed really well into physique development. There's channels and topics that feed really well into my own personal brand. And the fact that, things like the book come up, or things like educational, putting on seminars or co-hosting seminars or being a speaker at a seminar, right? You as an individual, you as someone who, I'm someone who very much enjoys doing those things. It's been a big part of my career, and I hope it continues to be. And that's not something that is usually ran through physique development, right? That's ran through me, right? And so it's important that, I own the domain coachaustinCurrent.com, right? It's a standalone domain. It's a standalone page that I put a lot of effort into, to where if you Google my name, you'll see my book, you'll see coachaustinCurrent.com, you'll see things where if someone's looking for something, or if someone Googles my name from a professional sense, they're not going to have to search very hard to find a very polished resume almost handed directly to them through the screen. Like, oh, hey, were you interested in asking me something? Here's my web page that's polished. It looks beautiful. It shows all my features. It tells you about me. It tells you where to find all my other content. It tells you what businesses I own. It tells you what projects I've worked on and published. It tells you everything, right? And to the trainers listening, it's important that you allow yourself to be seen if you're seeking out opportunity, right? And it sort of goes back to, if you never tell anyone you're a coach or a trainer, how are they supposed to know? Are they just supposed to look at you and just say like, oh, I bet you take on clients. Could I be your client? When has that ever happened? Like, other than you being a jacked person, right? Someone probably walked up to you and be like, hey man, you're probably a trainer, right? You taking on any clients, like, as a joke, but realistically, you got to sort of put yourself out there, right? You got to get reps. And again, opportunity comes through putting yourself out there. And it's never been this is not a bad time to establish a personal brand. And there's nothing wrong with having a personal brand and a business. And there's nothing wrong with not having a personal brand at all and solely working within a company. Neither are wrong, or one isn't better than the other. And I think you sort of feel it out. What do you enjoy most, right? I really enjoy physique development. I really enjoy being a part of the team there, and playing my role within that team. But I also really like the projects I work on under my own umbrella, under coachaustinCurrent.com, right? Through my own personal brand, that I've had a lot of opportunity to do things, which I found to be really rewarding and fulfilling, which I think then feed back into physique development, right? And they sort of feed each other, and it's been fun so far. So, I haven't fought it up to this point.
You said something that I've talked about numerous times in the past on the podcast with various guests. There are people who are very good or have the desire to step out and create a personal brand identity. I certainly fit that category. But there are going to be coaches passionate about the coaching who don't really gravitate towards the personal brand side, or would rather not do it at all. They love the idea of coaching. They would be happy not actually marketing. And it's companies like yours. I spoke at a conference in Spokane, and a lot of the Macros Inc. coaches were there.
Yeah.
My buddy Brad Peter is one of the co-owners of that. Brad was a speaker there as well. And they do a wonderful job of brand. Mike Dola, Stronger You. I've talked with Mike about it times. He's a good friend. RP, certainly, they have coaches under their umbrella, and they seem to foster their coaches to have more individual brand identities, but you don't really have to under RP. And you go through there's lots of professionals who have coaches under them. Sohee Lee has she has a small team of coaches, and it takes the pressure off. So it's perfectly okay to go that route. I like and value, and I have to remember that I have a bias toward having a personal brand. And what people will notice is, certainly the guests on this podcast, a lot of my friends are people who are more well-known personal brand types. That makes sense, right? But appearing on podcasts as a guest is not the be all end all of everything. It's actually funny. You will get people who be like, hey man, I've got a great story. I'd love to come on your podcast. It's like, that's not kind of how it works.
Yeah.
Totally, right. Like, and it's not to disparage that, but I think people think that, okay, I appear on, a big circulated podcast, and that's going to establish me. Then I'm going to be known, and I'm in the industry. That it doesn't happen like that. That's like wanting your social media to go viral I know there's a book. Oh, it's Social Media Success for Every Brand. Claire Diaz Ortiz. And she used this example about how there are literally companies that their whole social media strategy is to get Elon Musk or someone else famous to retweet them so they can go viral. That's completely the wrong approach. It's got to be building what we've talked about, the career capital, the article writing. It's that stuff time and time again. You build up this entire library. And then that's when someone reaches out and asks you to write a book for them. Like it's happened to you, like it's happened to Jason Brown, one of the T Nation guys. Gareth Sapstead just released a book.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this stuff,
I got it right here.
Oh, sweet. Yeah. We were talking, he's going to get his hands on a copy and send it to me if he can. So I'm like, all right, cool. Well, you know, I like signed shit, right? I'll happily buy it because I know it's going to be amazing.
Yeah.
But, you know, if you are serious about going down this road, you do have to put in a lot of work. And like you said, you have to create without the expectation of specific reward for each individual article you publish, every podcast episode. This is number 200 in the history of this. You know, there have been some really big episodes that have done really, really well, but it's the cumulative effect of doing it week in, week out that has led to a lot of the stuff that's happened. I wasn't able to get John, sorry, my voice, wasn't able to get John Berardi to come on here as an unknown podcast out of the blue. It took building a relationship with PN, which they initiated, had several of their people on, including Krista Scott Dixon and Brian St. Pierre. Those two are two of the biggest architects of their brand.
Yeah.
Where John, who is very picky about ever doing this stuff, heard good things and said, okay, I'll come on, because I'd fed through the loop that I knew a lot about John and his history.
Yeah.
So,
it's very important.
I think people get that from our conversation.
Yeah, that's incredibly important. And I think to create without any expectation of return, but also to create to actually earn it, man. Like there's something to earning what you get from the hard work you're putting in, right? There was something to, right? There's a level of sort of disbelief of getting to write the book and to work on a project like that and to publish it and to see that it's been out there and circulating and helpful and people are really getting value from it, which honestly brings a smile to my face daily. I'm just like, man, that's awesome. But there was a level of like, when I got the opportunity, it wasn't that I was like, oh, finally someone's recognizing me, right? It wasn't that at all. It was the fact of like, I'm nervous to do this, but I feel like I'm actually ready and able to do it because I've put in the hours, I've put in the years and years of education, and I've put in the work to actually earn the right to be in a position to work on something like this, not to deserve it, to work on something like it, right? And I think that's an important distinction, right? Don't work on things, don't produce things to deserve something in the future. Work on something to earn the right to be in the conversation, to work on it, right? So earn the right to be in a conversation like this, earn the right to be in a group of people at a seminar that you go to in the future, right? There's a level, not that you know, that you have to like be someone to talk to people, but like, and I don't think that should be in your head at all, but I think there's a level of, and that's not what I'm saying, but there's a level of earning your place in somewhere because of your hard work, because of your original voice, because you've put yourself out there time and time again, knowing that at any point, and almost at every point on social media, someone's going to jab, right? You're just going to get continuous jabs. You're going to get people who are like, man, this was super helpful. Then you're going to get people who literally shoot down all aspirations of creating ever again, right? But it's not about them. It's just about creating for the sake of creating for the sake of actually helping people and earning your position. Because I can tell you, if you want to feel like a fraud and feel like an imposter, arrive at an opportunity that you aren't ready for and that you didn't earn. And boy, you just signed your ticket on a one-way ship to, I don't know what the hell is going on, and I feel like a fraud, right? And that is that'd be a terrible place to be, right? And so, yeah, there's just something to earning something, and there's something to putting in the work. And, you know, again, within social media, I don't know, I'm younger than you are, but I'm still a part of the generation that mainly grew up most of my life without technology, without social media, without smartphones. And the only thing I ever know, and a lot of my, you know, one of my biggest mentors is my grandfather, who was a lifetime football coach, college football coach. And I was around career guys like that growing up. And what I was repeatedly told is phrases like, who are you when no one's looking, right? How much work are you willing to put in that no one's going to see, right? And how long are you willing to put that in before you give up and quit, right? And so like those phrases are constantly in my mind. And in a world where we have instantaneous feedback on our value and our validation within our position, within our given industry or space, it's really hard to value the delayed gratification. It's really hard to value the time within the equation of, time and effort over a given period, right? And so I really think it's important to put in that work and to value that sense of earning the right to be there, earn your seat at the table. And again, you're going to be so grateful that you did. And I'm still trying to do it. Like I'm still trying to show up and earn my right at the table I'm seated at, right? And that table changes. You level up. You move to an adjacent table, right? There's so many metaphors and things you can compare it to, but I think it's important to earn it, right? And to put in the work and to know that when you get there, it was because of the work you did, not because of something else.
Something I'll leave off with this. In my presentation I recently did, I remember feeling like there was two different sort of categories or tiers of people in the industry. There are all these people who were writing for T Nation and appearing on the big podcasts of the day, and then the rest of us on the gym floor. So I didn't know there was a path or see that was possible to get a seat at that table that you're talking about. I know what you mean, because I keep getting invitations to that table. I keep sitting down at that table in various different realms. I write for publications that I thought, oh, that would be super cool, but I could never actually imagine ever doing it.
Yeah.
So there is a path, and I've actually trying on my social media and through my writing to show people here's the route to take. And it's a lot of the same things you just talked about. There's a lot of work that goes into it. So if anybody has any further questions, please DM me, but we got to get you following Austin and check out his books. So tell them where to find you.
Yeah. So I hang out on Instagram, similar to Andrew. So Austin Current on Instagram. So just search Austin. It'll be a bearded fella. He'll show up, and click on that profile. And my book, Science of Strength Training, you can find it on Amazon, and that's the easiest place to find it. But it is sold, I know across the US at least, it's sold at Sam's, Target, Costco, Walmart, all of those places, Barnes and Noble, those type of places. So if you're in person and you want to go on a scavenger hunt, go for it. But if you just kind of want a easy access to it, and you'll probably get it before you even click order, just do it on Amazon. They'll get it to you.
I got mine really fast. I did the Amazon route.
Yeah.
And up here in Canada, we've got Indigo chapters. And I discovered that Indigo in the US is like a series of medical like centers. And here in Canada, it's a bookstore. So don't get confused. So anyway, I appreciate everybody tuning in. Austin, it's great to have you on. That's something we chatted about before, but we got to chat about off air. And for anybody listening, again, shoot me a message if you're not following my social media. I want to connect with you guys. Andrew Coates Fitness on Instagram. That's my hub for everything. And if you are finding this through Austin's media and hearing my podcast for the first time, then take a scroll through my previous guests, especially the last 50, and you're going to find Mike Isertel and Sam Spinelli and Quinn Hennick and a lot of other writers and educators and authors in the fitness space who you may be following and might be interested in. So I hope it'll be at least worth checking out a few more episodes, and maybe I'll earn your subscribe and ongoing patronage. Thank you so much, Austin. Thank you. And we'll work on another guest for next week.